Confidence is not a fluke, confidence is a choice, and it begins with your mindset. In this podcast, you will get all sorts of mindset tools to help you reduce self criticism and overwhelm while increasing your empowerment and courage. I am passionate about helping women decrease their mental drama and increase their self awareness while leaving behind all the perfectionist tendencies. We do so by empowering ourselves one episode at a time. I am Olga, your host, former therapist, life coach, blissfully an IVF mother, and this is the Journey to Happy podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to an episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. It's been such a long time since I last recorded an episode. Now, you guys have been listening to episode after episode because I was really proactive at the beginning of the year and just I've recorded a whole bunch of episodes. So I haven't had to record one until recently. And I feel like I just haven't talked to you guys for so long. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes nonetheless. I have been really mindful and thoughtful about what kind of information I'm posting here for you guys. And I'm certainly really thinking about how to best support all of you listening. I want to begin by celebrating that we have 70, we're past 70,000 listeners or downloads, I should say. And that's been incredibly exciting for me. I actually celebrated today when I opened my stats and saw that increase we had. I think we were celebrating 50 or 40,000 at around Christmas, and we're now starting May or finishing April as I'm recording this episode. And so much has happened in my life. I will give you a quick update and then we're going to jump into today's subject, which is all about self investment. I hired a new coach and I've got all these thoughts about what it felt like to make this investment. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about my personal life. I was away with my family, my husband and my son for 6 weeks, you guys. I can't tell you what that does to your soul in the middle of a winter to just go somewhere warm. So we were for 2 weeks in Florida. We stayed at my in-laws' house. We visited my brother. I also have a brother who lives there, so we were staying between both places. And we left here, Ottawa, to go to Miami or to Florida. We stayed there for 1 week. Then we went to Colombia for 4 weeks. And so that's home for me. Colombia is home. And then when we were on our way back, we stopped back in Florida for another week. Now, last summer, still in the middle of COVID, we decided to travel inside Canada. We absolutely love traveling. And you know what? For those who are not in Canada, something really strange. Canadians travel quite a bit. We're just not fans of traveling within Canada for some reason. But COVID changed that a bit for many of us. And so we went to the West Coast. I had never been. And my husband had been to some of the places we visited, and it was so nice. We were gone for 2 weeks. That's last summer. By the end of the second week, I was so ready to come home. I just didn't want to sleep at a hotel anymore. I didn't want to go in another car ride and see another beautiful scenery that we hadn't seen. I just wanted to be home. So when we booked the 6 weeks away, I was really worried that 2 weeks later I was going to be wanting to be home, but no, I was not feeling like I wanted to come home. In fact, the end of our 6 week found me feeling like I could extend my trip. In fact, I could move somewhere where there is palm trees and beautiful ocean all the time. But we came back about 3, 4 weeks, maybe a month now ago. And it also feels really nice to be home and spring is starting. I was explaining to my son today how the trees, like to pay attention to the trees that had no leaves, but soon they'll start having some. And yeah, I love the seasons and definitely the spring is one of my favorites. So I know some of you like to know what I'm up to. And so I just thought I'll tell you. I recently interviewed two of the women who are in my Reset Your Mindset program. And one of the things they said they love most about being coached by me is that I seem human. Like there is a human connection. They can know what I'm thinking, know what I did this morning, and just sort of feel like they know me at a personal level, which I think is often not something that coaches do, or if you haven't had a coach, maybe a therapist, it feels like there's a bit of a professional wall in between. It's not to say that I'm not professional. I'm definitely an expert at what I do, but I don't see the need to hide behind my profession, to not share who I am and how I think. And in fact, much of what I coach on, all of what I coach on, are tools that I've personally used. So to leave my personal experience out of the coaching experience, I think will be the service to my community. So that's what I personally choose, but that's such a personal thing for each coach or therapist to do. Now, I know my clients love it, and that's why they're my clients. They like this style of coaching where they just get to know about what's happening. And on that note, let's talk about my new coach. I think a few episodes ago, probably 6 months ago, I had told you that I had regretted not making that move. And so this is a coach I've been listening to for, I want to say maybe a year now. Yeah, probably a year. And she has a podcast, and I love her podcast. And her podcast has already helped me change so much of how I do my business. She's a business coach. She's also a life coach. I just love everything about this woman, her work ethic, how she thinks, how she teaches, who she is, how she feels about her husband. Like, I just love all the things. I admire her so much. And I absolutely want to be coached by her. And so I was in one of her containers recently, and I signed up to that one because when I first applied to her first training, or her first the first time I applied, is not her first, but when I applied to this mastermind that she teaches, I freaked out the moment I got my acceptance letter, because you have to apply and send a video, and you have to meet a criteria. And I was so excited. I think I felt when I was applying that I just wanted to see if I could get in. And when I did get in, then I freaked out. My mind had so many thoughts around why that was a scary move and why I shouldn't invest that much money. It's very expensive. It's very expensive. And why couldn't, and what if I didn't bring that money back? And what if I failed at trying her strategic steps and tools and then it didn't work for me? And what if? And I could not self coach out of it. In fact, I could, I just didn't want to. I simply was not ready. And the application is only, or the acceptance is only open for 24 hours. So once you get accepted, you've got 24 hours to make full payment, which is also terrifying, by the way. And then that's it. You're in or you're out. Couldn't sleep the night before. I remember thinking, like, how am I going to get out of this? And do I want to get out of this? And why am I get out of it? And so I have never done so much self-coaching. And I finally came to a conclusion, of course, after my window was closed, I came to a conclusion that ultimately the thought that I let get in the way of me making that investment was I couldn't cope with the reality of having invested this much money on myself, on my self growth and self development, on my business, and not make it work. If it didn't, in other words, if it didn't work, I couldn't cope with that. It would be too great of a disappointment, which led me to want to do this podcast because I do feel many of our mental drama blockages, to call them that, thoughts that just interfere with our progress, tend to underestimate our capacity to cope, to deal with heavy things, to deal with disappointment, with sadness, with heartache. We underestimate that, and we completely overestimate the risk level. It's like the risk in my brain at that moment felt like it was evident that I was going to fail and that I was not going to be able to cope with that. And so I was overestimating risk and underestimating my ability to cope with risk. And I have to tell you, this was very strategic on her part. But the week after, Her podcast was this one woman who didn't have the money, like didn't have any money. Like she was practically homeless. And she asked her boyfriend, her mom, her friends. She essentially just borrowed money to pay for this. And before the program started, just having access to the training, before she even started getting coached, she had paid back her money, her investment, because the training was so good and she was so committed to making her money back. And so I had already been feeling really regretful because I had noticed, and I do feel that regret comes, anyways, for me, regret comes when I was just not courageous. It's not that it wasn't the good thing for me to do, it clearly was, but I was not courageous. And so that's when I feel regretful, when I'm like, I lacked a bit of courage to have made a decision that was in my best interest. And not only in my best interest, in my client's best interest, because the more coaching I get, the better I get at coaching. So I told my husband I had a regret, and it's so foreign in this household for us to say that word because we are impulsive by nature. So when we feel like doing something, we just do it. And when we don't feel like doing something, we just don't. And so regret is not, it's not something we talk about, it's not something we feel. We don't talk about it because we don't feel it. We're almost never in that scenario. But I was there 6 months ago regretting how I made the investment. Anyways, I took the last 6 months to coach myself through that, to get out of one by one, guys, at each of these thoughts. And I explore them with playfulness. I wanted to uncover ultimately why had I had such a hard time deciding to invest in myself. And so I've come to a few conclusions that I thought will be helpful to share with you in the podcast in case that you also suffer from mental drama that stops you from having the courage to feel all the emotions, to do the thing that ultimately is not only in your best interest, but in the best interest of everybody around you. And so for me, it was this investment. For you, might be something else, like applying for a new job or learning a second language or something around that. I want to say though that I want to offer you that I want to save you time so it doesn't take you 6 months to coach yourself out of it. And I do want to offer that although I've regretted it, I wouldn't have had the amazing awareness and self coaching. You wouldn't have this episode of the podcast because I would have not done the work and still started to be coached while having this mental drama. And now I can see how that would have been so unproductive because I would have been battling, just resisting so much of the coaching, thinking, I'm not ready for it. Who am I to do this? So I do think that step one to self investment, if you do have a hard time, and I hear with my clients, oh, I have to consult with my husband first. I don't know what would he say. I actually had one of my clients, she signed up anyways for reset, but she did say her husband was questioning her, like, how are you going to pay for this? And she said, I have no idea, but I will. And I love that attitude because she's going to figure it out. She knows this is good for her and she's going to figure it out like I will figure it out with my coach, or like I did figure it out, I should say. Okay, so step number one to that discomfort is not it's not to ignore it. I feel that when we're uncomfortable spending on ourselves, and I want to say it's not spoiling yourself either, is investing in yourself. And you guys, I'm not just talking about going to school and investing in that or investing money on a side business, any money, any money that's an investment. And what I call an investment is that it will add energy or happiness or money or love into my life. To me, that's an investment. Whereas for you, it might be like plants in your garden and like they cost money. They're an investment. And maybe nobody in your household cares about plants, but you do. And so that's an investment. Anyways, if you notice that you have sort of like these phrases going on in your head, you might even say them out loud that sort of justify why is selfish, why is not okay, why you're not. It's like splurging. Why you cannot spend money on yourself. I don't want you to just continue to be an autopilot, not listening to that, not getting curious about where that comes from. And I invite you to do sort of like a heart to heart with yourself. First, notice that you have that discomfort, that that is something that you commonly say. I have clients who, talking about this, said proudly they would only buy things for themselves if it was on sale, even if it wasn't the color they liked or the style they liked, because it was a good deal, they would buy that because it was for them. And why would they want to spend money on themselves? And there was that sense of pride because it's a good thing to save money and to get a good deal. We all like a good deal, but when that's your default, when that's the only time you buy something for yourself, and then you begin to sacrifice the color, maybe even the size you want, just because, well, it was cheap. I say you pay attention to that, not to judge yourself and say, there is something wrong with me. I can't spend money on myself, but simply to notice in what areas perhaps you're okay investing in yourself and what areas not so much. And women, we are notoriously good at sacrificing our happiness, our health, our wealth in the name of making others happy. And as much as I think that's a beautiful thing, I also think that it is not necessary and painful. And so, why would we engage in that? So, when I was investing this time around and I knew the application was going to open, this starts in August, where we have to apply in April. And you have to pay in full in April. So in my head, I still had a lot of time to start. Then I realized this was happening now. And the application process this time was with so much ease. Told my husband, I'm applying. He's like, okay, you're doing that. Good for you. I waited patiently for the application to open, recorded my video, submitted my application, knew I was going to get accepted. And I know you might think, obviously, she's going to accept anybody who's willing to pay, but she has a really strong criteria. And I like that about her. So, met the criteria, got accepted. Next morning, I sent off my payment without an ounce of drama. And that's when it hit me. When I realized that was such a testament to the self growth I had created for myself over the last 6 months. That the thing that seemed so impossible, I almost wanted to puke, kind of feeling to do 6 months ago, I managed to do with such an ease 6 months later. Like, actually, I would add excitement. I am excited. Like looking forward to how this is going to work. I'm already going through the trainings. I'm already implementing. I'm just so happy. Zero drama, zero fear of what's going to happen. There is no what ifs. And the only what ifs that I now have are all about I'm going to succeed. There's no way. I've got everything I need in front of me to succeed. It's like my success is inevitable. That's how I'm thinking and feeling. So why the change? And that's again why I want to talk to you guys. I'm going to walk you through what I reflected on and what I did and how I got here. First of all, was to notice that feeling, that feeling that I felt 6 months ago was so severe. And then the regret, I just knew I had to open that box of Pandora and see what was in it. And for me, as somebody who's had anxiety my entire life, that even that phrase would have given me anxiety in the past when I'm like, a Pandora box. Hell no, that's unpredictable. What's going to be in there? That would have given me anxiety. But now that I know it's never as scary as my mind thinks, and it's actually going to be helping me make life feel light, fun, and easy, it is totally worth it to explore. And it used to be a scary thing to do because, in all honesty, I will go in with judging eyes. I would go in to explore what was inside my mind, what was the mental drama that I had, but only so that I could judge it, so that I could say, wow, what kind of person are you to have these thoughts? This must be true. Now that I know better, thank you, life coaching in my life has helped me. Now that I know better, I realized that all I had to look for were thoughts that were getting on the way of me doing the thing that was courageous. So I knew I must have had a lot of heavy thoughts that were underestimating my ability to cope and were overestimating the risk involved. And I want to say, so it's been 6 months. I'm going to say that at the very least, once a week, I did the thought work formula that I teach inside Reset Your Mindset. And I explored my thoughts. And one by one, I was able to capture them, the things that I was thinking. None of them made sense. None of them were even remotely close to being factual, but they felt so real because they started with what if? And in the what if world, everything is possible. And once you have a thought, you will have an emotion. So they felt real. So real that I didn't make the move 6 months ago. So getting curious about it is super important so that you have the ability to explore it. And when you're exploring a thought, especially when you do it with this formula that I teach, you're going to be able to be as neutral as possible. So in this, and I go, there's a whole module inside Reset Your Mindset that teaches you, like, even if you have never done any work around reflection, journaling, self exploring of the mind, and this is such a simplified way to look into our behaviors from the perspective of our thoughts. So, what got me curious was my behavior of I didn't apply to the mastermind that I've been wanting to apply. That behavior didn't sit well with me and gave me other emotions. When you're exploring your emotions from a place of judgment, it's a very unpleasant experience, and you likely end up quitting before the conclusion is done. So you actually walk away with any knowledge about why you may have behaved in that way. So I'm inviting you to explore for yourself, where did this behavior come from? What thoughts did I have prior to this behavior? In fact, what do I still think about when I think of why I behaved that way? 'Cause I felt that it was so justified. And so I would tell myself I didn't have this money in the bank account, all of it. And like I didn't have any other sources. It would be stressful. I wouldn't want to. What if it does? Like, really, it was what if it doesn't work out? And that's, ladies, what we all think about investing in ourselves. What if I need that money for later? What if my benefits don't cover it? What if I think it will help me, but it doesn't help me? What if I don't like being coaching group? What if, and we just fill in the blank, but really, if you get curious, you're going to notice that almost never is about the excuse we're giving. But behind that feeling of discomfort, there is another thought that is also not true, but that we believe it. And I would care to say and offer to you guys that for most of us, the thought that gets in the way of investing in self is, what if I don't make this? If I don't do something with it and essentially I fail? What if I pay for my master's degree and I don't do well? Or I don't get another job, a better job? So why do that? What if I buy myself these really expensive shoes and then I stop making money altogether. What am I going to do? And I spend this chunk of money on my shoes. What if I go on that trip that I wanted to go on and then I lose my job? Like we're just going through random scenarios that haven't even happened just to discourage ourselves. So ultimately, the thought is you couldn't cope with this not going right. And then two, it's like you assume that it's not gonna go right. You never stop and think to yourself, what if that investment is the best thing that I ever did to me, for me? What if this investment is the thing that I've been actually missing, wanting, needing to feel happy, light, easy? And so because we're not curious about exploring where the feeling or the behaviors come from, we just kind of block it, don't learn anything from that emotion, from that feeling, and we just move on and we keep having these scenarios repeat themselves. I became curious about why women have such a hard time investing. And the more I talk to my clients and the women that I've talked to, I've realized that ultimately we think, like I said, it's not worth we're not worth the investment, whether that's a new pair of jeans or a new course or something. And so we try to justify the what's in it for me. Like what guarantees do I have? And ultimately, that's what made it initially easier for me to invest in my coach. She says if I don't make my money back, she gives me money back. And I was like, oh, there you go. So I'm good. And I actually offered the same insight reset because I want people to put their mind at ease, that part of your brain that is worried, that thinks it's very unsafe to invest in yourself. I want that part of your brain to feel safe. Ladies, can you imagine? Can you believe that the reason we don't invest in ourselves is because we don't feel is safe? You tell yourself I cannot justify spending this much money on myself when I've got kids, groceries, car payments, but what if this was the investment that was going to make you have the mental energy again and maybe finally have the confidence to apply to the job that is going to give you more money? What if that investment is the thing that your marriage actually needs? What if that investment is the thing that your children have been waiting for you to do to finally show up home super happy, knowing who you are, right? So I want you to have sort of this rule when you are having behaviors that stop you from self investing, self loving, self creating, creating time and space for yourself. I'm going to call it self indulgence, but I don't like that word because I don't think it should be indulgence. I think is needed to spend time and money on ourselves. We're freaking human. We would think it's okay for our family members to invest time and money on themselves, but we don't think of it that way for ourselves. So I want you to think of that. And I want you to think, what am I underestimating and what am I overestimating? And sort of write down all the thoughts you have. And for the time being, ask yourself, are these thoughts factual? Like if I went to court today and I had to prove that this is the truth, would I have enough evidence to prove these thoughts to be true? And lastly, how are these thoughts making me feel? Do I like the feelings that are brought by these thoughts? If not, what thoughts could I choose to have instead that bring me to a different place, different feeling? And that's personally when I like to think of the scenario where I succeed. The scenario where actually, what if just with the same ease that I can think, who am I to buy these new jeans that are $100? To think about who would I need to be to think that it's totally okay for me to buy these jeans? Who would I need to be? Who would I need to be to think that it's totally okay to book, I don't know, a day off and leave my husband with my child? And I'm going to be guilt free because I am deserving of a moment on my own. And that doesn't make me a bad mom. The complete opposite actually makes me a great mom. I come back happy and renewed and re energized. So explore the emotions and the thoughts with ease. Try to see what is the real thing that you think about? What is the real thought that is stopping you from making that investment in self? Where does that discomfort come from? Ask yourself, could I handle the discomfort? Let's say that you really feel bad about buying yourself a new pair of jeans that are not on sale. Getting curious about the thoughts that you have. And I would really love for you to not censor them and just really write down all the thoughts you have. Then do it again, get to the real thoughts. And if you didn't have these thoughts, asking yourself, if I didn't have any of those thoughts, would I be still buying these jeans? And if the answer is yes, is why? And so create a new thought. You can create new thoughts. You choose the thoughts. I agree. We don't always think like we choose the thoughts, they just show up. But once they show up and you become aware, you are the boss. You get to choose if you like those thoughts. And if you don't like them, guess what? By thoughts, you make a new one and you make a new one that serves you. So I personally have been really, really exploring my behavior with investment on self. I I might be a strange kind because while I had a hard time investing this large amount of money on business coaching, like it's for my business technically, so really it could be more justifiable. Um, I have no issues shopping, like none whatsoever. I can spend probably the same amount of money I spent on my coach in 1 year just buying clothes and not feel 1 ounce of remorse. It's almost like, okay, I don't get to have a life. That's okay. I get to shop. Uh, but that also I became curious about that. How come I have ease spending here, but I don't here? Maybe the same is for you. And again, I don't do this to judge myself. I used to. I don't. I don't want to say like, oh my God, I have a shopping problem. That's not the point of this observation. It's to really begin to recognize what thoughts do I have about, say, shopping for clothes that give me permission to do it with ease? And how do they differ from me investing on a business coach? Oh, and the answers that you have revealed to yourself are so much fun. And you're going to get to question yourself and understand so much more about yourself. And just because you have those thoughts doesn't mean you have to keep having them. If you bring them to your awareness and you realize the thoughts were just misunderstandings, so maybe maybe for me to why I have an ease shopping for clothes. First of all, it was modeled to me by my mom my entire life. I don't think she ever modeled having a coach. And my mom had a phrase that it's like a mantra for me. If it is for you, it's not expensive. When it came to clothing, because this is the thing that I would do commonly with my mom. I never commonly went shopping for coaching with my mom. And in fact, if I was to tell her how much I pay for my coach, she would probably think that's insane. She would be saying, if it's for you, it's not expensive. I think she'd be telling me, like, what is wrong with you? And so much of our behaviors today still come from what we were exposed to as children. And our responsibility as grown adults is to look back, understand where they come from, maybe choose to keep them if we still like them. But if we think they're not serving us, we get to choose to think differently. And I do believe for women, self investment is not something that's been modeled by our moms. It's not something that is, even the word investment, very few women were raised to think about making investments in general, that alone, self investments. And so I do think it's a subject that as a community, we have to explore and begin to change the patterns that stop us from self investment, that make us feel selfish and guilty. You know, for most of my clients who are married to men, uh, they always think, "Oh, what am I? What is my poor husband going to do? Or not poor, but what is my husband going to think? I feel bad about it." And I ask them, like, "Is your husband not investing on himself at all?" No, I don't think so. I mean, he doesn't have a coach. Okay. Does he have golf classes that he goes to? Or classes passes? Does he, I don't know, go to hockey, plays hockey? Does he do all these things? Because typically men don't have half the mental drama that we do about spending on self, investing on self. They invest largely, um, and in some cases more than women, even though research shows that women are better at investing because we have more patience. We can take less risks and wait more for our investments to produce. Men want to be rich fast and furiously, and so they end up taking bigger risks and bigger losses. So, despite that, we are not investing on self, on stocks, on real estate, on anything. We're just like, "Mm, not sure that I could. I'm not sure that I could overcome if this didn't work out." And so, what do we choose to do? Stay status quo. We don't move forward, we don't move backward. That's safe, as per your mind. So, ladies, safe is not where growth is. Safe, it's only like what you think is safe, and staying in the safety zone is simply lack of self awareness to understand that you have one thought, that you're essentially one thought away from making a difference, from being courageous, from thinking that you are, in fact, capable of overcoming the risk, and that the risk is, in fact, not as big as you think it is because you're completely overestimating the risk. That's what I realized when it comes to investments on self. So I want to encourage you guys to really pay attention for yourself. What stops you from self investment? What are your thoughts on self investment? Like, do you currently have the limiting thoughts that say selfish, you've got other priorities, everything is a priority but yourself? Oh, you don't have enough money, you couldn't possibly afford. When I saw how much my coach cost, and her program ends every 6 months, you have to renew. So you have to pay the full amount every 6 months. I was like, there is no way I can afford that. That was my thought. And I went with it. Because if I was to afford that and then I failed, like my brain told me I would, then that'll be just not good for my finances. And when I chose to have a different thought, everything changed. When I chose to think, why would I fail when I'm going to be given all the tools to succeed? And in fact, when have I ever failed at anything that I've prioritized, that I've said this is important and I want to see it through? So our thoughts have all the power to make something seem possible or impossible. The choice is ours. We get to decide. I was telling you how I was away with my family for 6 weeks. The entire 6 weeks that we were gone, I kept thinking and telling my husband, do you remember 8 years ago when we met that we said we wanted to live the life of a retired couple? And it seemed so far away. Like I was working full time. I had just had a promotion for a management position that felt like that. Well, not felt, it was something I was after for a long time. And I finally had it. It felt so impossible. It felt like a dream. When you think, oh, I wish I win the lotto, and what would I do with the lotto if I won it? That's how that conversation felt 8 years ago. I remember it so vividly. Waking up, having to go to work, not one thing, and just telling my husband, what will we need to do to act like we're retired, to live that life, but not be retired, just doing some jobs that allow us to do this. Personally, that's all we had to ask ourselves. We ask ourselves same question over and over. What would create passive income for us? What could give us the lifestyles? We realized first we had to quit our jobs. It's a number one step because for as long as we worked for somebody, there's no way We could go golfing on a Wednesday morning or take 6 weeks off in the middle of winter with all the snowbirds. So we quit our jobs. We created a plan, start executing on the plan. When it was okay to quit our jobs, we did. And we haven't looked back. So those 6 weeks for me were such a testament of how incredible it is to not tell the brain. It would be impossible to do so because the brain would just give you all the reasons why it would, but to stay open and playful and ask yourself, how would I make that work? What would need to happen? And don't force it, let it happen, be ready for it, coach yourself out of all the mental trauma that you have because you will have it. And I'm not talking about quitting your job and opening your own business. It's not for everybody. I am simply talking about asking yourself these questions when you feel that you would like something, but you're not taking action towards it. Is because you probably don't believe it can happen. You're overestimating risk, underestimating your capacity to do it. And so it's such a fun question to ask. What would need to happen for me to become a professional hockey player? Even if, you know, I'm 39 and they started skating when they were 4 and I haven't, and like your brain is going to want to give you all of those things to keep you safe. Ask yourself, you're not being hurt, but just asking yourself that. What would it take for me to feel comfortable investing in myself or in yoga classes or in French lessons or in whatever? And if it comes down to actually like actual money that you literally lack resources, I never say I cannot afford that. That's not true. I said that about this program. And then I changed my mind. I asked myself, how could I afford that? See, so the slight difference makes such a big, yeah, it guides your brain to a complete different place. Just one word can just bring your brain to a complete different place. And that's essentially the process that I teach you, one of the processes that I teach you inside Reset Your Mindset, where you learn to dissect from one event that happens that makes you feel uncomfortable, the thoughts you have, and the observation of what happens following those thoughts, and then how to shift it because your brain can always be shifted. This is what I call rewiring of your brain. Anyways, if you are like me and you've got regrets, you feel that you should have spent money on yourself, but you're second guessing, you're doing all the research to make sure that it's the right thing, you're probably paralyzed, not taking action. You are probably definitely, I would say, underestimating your ability to be okay, even if it fails, and you're overestimating the risk that things will go wrong. At the end of the day, the only reassurance you need from you is that no matter what, you will be okay. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. I will see you guys next Monday and maybe tell you a little bit more about my trip. I had taken so many notes because I wanted to have all those memories fresh to share with you. A little detail here and there. Talk to you guys next week. Bye now.
Hey, Olga here, and I'm here to invite you to join me in 5 days of taking you from self critical to self confident by changing the way you speak to yourself. Your inner dialogue has everything to do with your confidence, whether you have it or you don't. And it all comes back to how we perceive ourselves and to the blockages that we might have internally to finally accept and value who we are as we are now. I have a very useful strategy that has been known to help many make that shift from critical to confident, and I want to share that invitation with you. So the waiting list is now open. You can go ahead and add your name, and by being in the waiting list, you get to be the first one notified when I open for registration. Also, you get some extra perks. So head over to the show notes, sign up for the waiting list, Detox the Mind. Talk to you guys soon.